Welcome back to Engineers Workshop, day 107 in Putin's war on Ukraine. So I've got a new project I wanted to introduce to you today, and it involves the K&T and an accessory that I did not have. Most important thing that the K&T came with, in my opinion, is the power knee. The DRO was nice, but there was a couple things that was missing. The lubrication, the coolant pump, the air pump, all of the plumbing and returns associated with that. It didn't have any of the fancy cherrying attachments or slotting attachments. I'm not too worried about that, but I had an opportunity. I met a guy, turned out to be a buddy, and his name is Mark. He had a number of K&Ts, and his operating one, he's got an operating one and some parts machines. The operating one, he retrofitted an X-axis power feed into a Y-axis power feed. So he's got like the only K&T with factory power feed on the X and the Y-axis. It's really cool. He sent me some pictures of it. If I can find them, I'll include them in the video. But anyway, I also bought from Mark the coolant pump, the air pump, the lines going up to the, near the head, and there's a ring that attaches around the Quill that brings the, coolant hose up to that point. What else I get from them? So most recently I got a spare drive motor with the snowmobile type expandable belt spindle, because mine's got a lot of play in the bushing. The return, there's little cast iron shoes that return the coolant back into the, I guess you call it the saddle, so that it can drain back into the sump. So one of the things I did not have was a mechanism to kick out the automatic Quill feed. Basically now I can flip the lever and disengage the Quill feed, but there was a mechanism that mounted on the side of the head with adjustable stops, would automatically kick out the power feed when you would punch through the bottom of a piece. And so my buddy Mark was nice enough to loan me this assembly right here. This bolts onto the head, and through these adjustable stops here, moves up and down and rocks a little switch, little toggle here that pushes the feed buttons in, which is what stops the Quill feed. So let's take you over to the bench and I'll get you a little bit closer look at this, but I'm going to duplicate this. I have no clue how many videos it's going to take me, so I'm not going to number them per se. But there's a number of operations that I'm going to have to get familiar with and build my skills before I, launch into this. So let me just take it over to the bench and show you a little bit closer look at it, and also how it fits up onto the K&T. So here's the mechanism. It's a casting, that's cast iron, and there's some unmachined areas in here, but it's basically fully machined. And it has a really neat mechanism. So you can see there's a slide, and there's a pin that engages right there. And as that slide moves up and down, it rocks that little piece right there. And that is positioned on top of these two buttons on the head that disengage the Quill feed. There was a little sheet metal cover over this. I took that off so you could see it. This entire mechanism was kind of stuck in place. It was gummy with lubricant. And the machining on this is absolutely amazing. So this guy, was basically finished with some kind of a face mill. But when you look at this slide, this seems to be, to me, cast iron. But the fit in the grooves and the machining is just absolutely beautiful. There is zero play. You can't get really any wiggle on this. And that little offset pin engages in that slot. This stuff reminds me of, I'm thinking, what is all this made of? And if you look at like my Lufkin square, this has the same look and feel to it as the Lufkin square. And I imagine these are castings. I don't know if they're meionite or if it's a semi-steel or what, but that piece is just absolutely gorgeous. Even the little trip dogs are really nicely machined. and they're trapped in a slot as well. Not quite as close to fit on those. And then there's a couple of pins that are probably pressed into blind holes that limit the upward and downward movement of these things. That's how those adjust. The other thing is, look at this thing. This has almost no end play in it, and there's a center. So this is a lathe part, but look at that eccentric over there. And I had to clean it up to even see how it was made. But if you look really close, you can see that's a shaft pressed in, and there's a key. Might even be a stepped key that orients that little lobe with the pin that travels up and down, or rather it converts the linear motion into a rotary motion to activate those little buttons over on this side. Located by 2 dowels, retained by 3 socket head cap screws. These are 5/16 coarse thread, but the counterbores are too small for standard socket head cap screws, so it's another one of those cases where K&T must have made their own fasteners for this thing. So I'm just going to have to temporarily bolt the thing on. But I've cleaned everything up, and let me put it on the machine and show you how it works. Here I'm kind of looking up from the underside, and this area right here is where it bolts in, locating dowels and 3 attachment screws and the 2 buttons that disengage the feed. This is the stud that moves the pieces. So this would be positioned with those dowels engaging their pilot holes. And like I said, I don't have a bolt that will work in that head, so let's put a hex head bolt temporarily in place just to prevent this thing from popping off. And this is the, let's see, that's the upper travel stop. So I can stop that guy right there. And this is the lower travel stop. I'll just move him up arbitrarily. Now you can see that that moves up somewhat, and then it will move down somewhat and trip out. So let's power up and let's see how it works. Feed down. You can see we're starting to make contact. And this little cam is beginning to rotate. And it's kicked out. I put it over to its fastest speed so you can see the action on this thing. So, feed down, watch that cam as the trip hits it. It's going to start to rotate, and then this will move back to center. See, it's starting to rotate. Lever returns to neutral. And I'm assuming feed up works the same way. Pretty slick. So since Mark is letting me borrow this, and then I got to get it back to him, I basically have to document dimensionally all these pieces and then build a CAD model, and then I can send it back to him. So I've already modeled the slide and the trip dogs. I've started on the body, and for the most part I'm just using calipers to get all the dimensions. But to pick up the locations of these holes, I checked it normally by taking the inside to inside, outside to outside, adding divided by 2. It's coming out to some weird numbers. Normally you'd think this thing would be designed as some nominal, like 2.5 inches, 2 3/4 inches. But I'm going to put this in the vise, and I'm going to indicate these holes and use the DRO to pick up the locations of the dowels and the mounting holes relative to, let's say, the bottom edge, which is machined nice, and to this front edge. And then I'll use those dimensions from the DRO, input those into the CAD system to locate everything. The rest of it I can get with the calipers. So I'm going to set up now and pick up these points and the locations of all the circular features. This is a gauge block from Joe Pye that has a face exactly on center of a 3/4 inch shank. So I'm going to use that to find this edge. Basically does it without having to use a shim paper. Go back and forth until I get light contact and a light drag as I raise the quill. And I'm right on that edge. So I'm going to set a 0 on my X. Now come up to the front face and do the same. And I'm on that face. Set my Y 0. I think I will switch over to maybe a center drill. Drop them into those holes and then indicate with an indicator to pick up the exact 0. I should be able to eyeball that and get pretty close. Well, I finished modeling my quill stop assembly in SolidWorks, and I made it so that the trip dogs could be positioned anywhere, or they could be locked into place against their stops. And the coolest part about this is the eccentric. I zoom in on here. If you move this entire slide assembly, the eccentric shaft will rock and actuate the
the trip pins that are on the face of the quill mechanism. This area right in here is going to be real interesting to make. This is a shaft with a step key, 1/8 inch at the top, and I think it's 9/32 at the bottom, which has got to be flush on this surface, and then the this assembled shaft is trapped between this face and this face. And then there's a thin cover plate on the back side that covers up the back side of the this rocker. So with this, I can put dimensions on all of the features and begin a strategy towards making this part, or this set of parts, for the K&T. I might try to source some cast iron for the body of this and for this slide, and try to duplicate the look and the finish on the existing parts.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I know I'm going to look forward to a lot of days of figuring out how to machine something with hopefully close to as much accuracy as that original. Get that nice sliding fit on that slide in the body, and be able to, kick my quill in and out based on a depth that I set, rather than having to get the knee exactly right and running to the bottom of the travel. Because when you run the quill down and it hits the end of travel, there's a clutch in there that slips, and it becomes really difficult to disengage it with the lever. So this is the proper way to do it. I need to get one of those made up, mounted permanently on the mill, and that'll help drilling operations tremendously. So thanks again for tuning in to Engineers Workshop. As always, pray for our brothers and sisters in Ukraine, and stay safe.